Karen Mitchell thought calling the police would scare an 82-year-old man into giving up his home. What she didn't know. The police she called, every single one of them, answers to me. Let me tell you something you won't hear on your average HOA newsletter. This isn't about a chicken coop. It isn't about property values or community regulations or whatever flavor of control the local HOA flavor of the month is preaching. This is about power. Raw, petty, unearned power being thrown around by people who never earned a single ounce of it. And it's about what happens when one of them pushes too far. My name's Marcus Thompson. I'm a police chief in a town of 12,000 souls, give or take. And a couple of weeks ago, while I was attending a law enforcement symposium in San Francisco, the HOA president back home tried to evict my grandfather. Over chickens. 5 of them. Not 50. Not 100. 5 damn birds. She thought I wasn't around. Thought she could bully an old man into giving up the house he built with his wife, the house they'd lived in for over 40 years. What she didn't know was I had been watching her. For months. And what started as petty harassment turned into something far more sinister. You ever have that feeling? That burn in your gut that tells you something's wrong. More wrong than it appears on the surface? That's what I felt the day Rodriguez, my right-hand officer, texted me mid-meeting with the mayor. Chief, urgent. Karen Mitchell is trying to evict your grandfather. I barely caught the tail end of the budget talk before I bolted. When your family is under attack, you don't wait for permission. You move, and you move fast. Now let me back up a little. My grandfather, Walter, is a Vietnam vet. 82 years old and still sharp as a tack. Well, most days. He forgets things sometimes like mail, bills, HOA warnings. But never those chickens. Each one had a name, a story. Justice, the rooster, crowed every morning like clockwork. Freedom, the brown hen, was the feisty one. Liberty liked to nest near the porch. Hope was the shy one, always hiding behind the rest. And then there was Peace, a baby chick just barely feathered. Those birds weren't livestock to him. They were memory. They were meaning. They were his last connection to my grandmother, who passed 5 years back. She'd raised chickens too back in '65 before Walter shipped out. Karen Mitchell knew all of that. She knew Walter was forgetful. Knew he lived alone. Knew I wasn't around. She figured that gave her an opening. HOA Rule 47.3, she claimed, banned all poultry. But the actual bylaw only banned over 50 chickens. Not 5. Not even close. But rules didn't matter to Karen. Only power did. And when people like her sense weakness, they don't hesitate. They go for the throat. She sent him 3 warning letters. Walter, bless him, never opened a single one. Just stacked them with the rest of the junk mail. I tried to help him stay organized. But after my grandma passed, the house ran on what he called systematic chaos. It worked for him. Until now. Rodriguez told me Karen had been blowing up the precinct with calls, demanding Walter be cited, fined, removed from the property. She even dragged a fake lawyer into it. A slick little weasel named Bradley Kent, who looked like he printed his law degree at a gas station. They showed up at Walter's doorstep like a damn SWAT team, waving fake legal documents, threatening seizure of property, claiming HOA emergency powers. 6 of them. Against one old man and a coop full of birds. She figured nobody would push back. She figured wrong. Now, here's what most people don't understand. HOA power is real, but only because people believe it's real. Most of it's bluff, paper walls and jargon. But when you're 82, alone with a memory that slips like water through your hands, a wall of bluster feels like a bulldozer. That's why I never left things to chance. Weeks earlier, I told Rodriguez, when Karen moves, play along. Document everything. I want eyes on her every move. I had called it Operation Chicken Justice in my notebook, half as a joke, half because I knew exactly what kind of war this would be. And I was right. Every step she took was anticipated. Every fake code, every 911 call, every threat recorded, logged, timestamped. But this isn't just about being clever. This is personal. My grandmother used to tell me, the world's run by people who show up. And damn it, I was going to show up. The mayor was still rambling about infrastructure when I stood up, straightened my tie, and said, Family emergency, sir. He nodded. He knew. In small towns like ours, blood runs deeper than politics. I grabbed my uniform from the coat rack. Not because I needed it, but because sometimes symbols matter, especially when you're about to go head-to-head with tyranny dressed in khakis and pearls. The drive back felt endless. Every minute stretched like chewing gum in the heat. Rodriguez kept the updates coming. She's waving forged documents. She's threatening immediate seizure. She brought in muscle. Muscle. For a man who once dragged wounded comrades out of rice paddies with bullets flying overhead. It would have been laughable if it weren't so damn cruel. As I got closer to town, a video came through from Susan Morrison, my grandfather's neighbor, retired schoolteacher, and general badass. The footage showed Karen shoving Walter. One of her goons reached for the chickens. Emma, my niece, Walter's great-granddaughter, stood in front of them like a lion cub. "Don't touch my great-grandpa's chickens," she screamed. That broke something in me. 8 years old and already understanding what too many grown men forget. That standing your ground isn't about ego. It's about love. I arrived just as Karen dialed 911, declaring an elderly man had assaulted her. The irony nearly made me choke. Rodriguez and Davis pulled up, body cams running, every word she said becoming another brick in the case I was building. And then came the moment. The moment Karen's face turned pale. The moment she realized the police weren't there for her. That the officers she kept calling belonged to me. I stepped into the yard in full uniform. "Miss Mitchell," I said calmly, "I understand you're trying to evict my grandfather from his home of 40 years. You should have seen her face. It was like watching a tower of cards realize the wind was coming." "You're the police chief?" she stammered. You thought wrong," I replied. "That's the thing about people like Karen. They think uniforms obey them. They think authority is theirs by default. But they forget. It's the people behind the badges, the hearts behind the rules that decide what kind of world we live in. I could have arrested her then, could have ended it on the spot. But there's something better than handcuffs. It's called exposure. Letting people see a tyrant fall apart in public, unravel under the weight of their own ego." She sputtered legal nonsense. Kent tried to run. Davis stopped him. Rodriguez calmly read her the HOA bylaws. Every lie she spewed became evidence. Every puffed-up threat turned into leverage. And then came the kicker. The chicken, Freedom, leapt out of the coop and smacked Karen's phone from her hand. It hit the ground, revealing a wire taped underneath. "Is that a recording device?" she gasped. It was. Rodriguez had FBI approval weeks ago. We'd been recording everything. And now, Karen wasn't just a local menace. She was part of a federal investigation. So no, Karen, this wasn't just about 5 chickens. This was about legacy, about dignity, about an old man who served his country and deserved to live in peace, about a little girl learning what courage looks like, and yeah, about a grandson who wore a badge, but never forgot who he wore it for. You might be sitting in your favorite recliner right now, nodding along, maybe sipping your coffee, maybe thinking, "Damn right, that's how it's done." Well, let me tell you, this story ain't done. This was just chapter 1. Because after Karen was exposed, something darker crawled into the light. A man I'd arrested years ago, a name that made my blood run cold, and a plan that went beyond our neighborhood, stretching into something far bigger than chickens and bylaws. But that's another story. For now, remember this. You may be old, you may be retired, but you're not powerless. And if someone ever tries to push you out of the home you built, stand your ground. Even if you have to do it with a rooster named Justice at your side. It was the smell that hit me first. Not the usual dusty scent of old furniture or the warm, earthy musk of the chicken coop, but something sour, something off. I stepped into my grandfather's kitchen that night after Karen's stunt, and found Emma sitting cross-legged on the floor, cradling Hope, the smallest hen, in her arms. There were feathers everywhere, bits of overturned cornmeal, and one broken egg still dripping down the side of the counter. "She kicked the bag," Emma whispered, voice small but steady. "She said it was dirty and unhygienic and threw it across the room." Her hands trembled slightly as she held the hen close, as if shielding it from the lingering ghost of Karen's outrage. Grandpa Walter was in his recliner, a blanket draped over his lap and a long scratch on his right arm. I didn't mention it at first. I could feel the anger boiling behind my teeth and didn't want him to see it. He hated when I got cop eyes, as he used to call it. "They tried to take them again today," he said flatly, eyes glued to the muted television. "Said I signed something last month. I didn't." His voice was distant, unsure, like someone recounting a dream that turned to nightmare halfway through. I didn't doubt him. Karen was clever, manipulative, and worst of all, organized. Back at the station, we dug deeper. Rodriguez and Davis spent hours scouring through property filings, HOA letters, even scanned notes taken at the last Silverstone Community Board meeting. What we found wasn't just wrong, it was orchestrated. Fraudulent votes, fabricated emergency codes, and aggressive legal language designed to overwhelm residents who were either too old, too tired, or too damn trusting to fight back. Karen had been padding the HOA board with her own people for over a year. The treasurer was her cousin. The compliance officer was her hairdresser's ex-husband. The lawyer? Turns out Bradley Kent had been disbarred 3 years ago in Nevada and was living under a fake name. But what made my stomach clench wasn't any of that. It was the line item tucked in the meeting notes from March. Phase 1 clearance. Lot 117, begin with elderly or absentee. Lot 117 was Walter's. The phrase chilled me, clinical, strategic, like he was just a piece on a chessboard. And he wasn't the only one. 7 other homes on the list were occupied by seniors living alone. 3 had already left quietly. 1 had died a month prior, all under circumstances that, on their own, could be dismissed. Together, they told a story. I visited Dorothy next. She was 76, lived on Cedar Row, and used to teach home economics at the high school. I still remember her peanut brittle at every school bake sale. Her door barely opened when I knocked. She peeked out, face pale, breath shaky. "I thought they were coming back," she whispered, ushering me in quickly. "They came last week. 2 men in suits said I had violated the shrub height regulation. Shrubs said it was a second infraction and that I'd face daily fines. I told them I didn't know there was a first infraction. She showed me a stack of letters marked Final Notice, all dated within a 48-hour window. It was deliberate, meant to confuse, overwhelm, pressure. Legal bullying HOA style. Back at the station, we added Dorothy's file to the growing binder we were now calling the chicken file. Half in jest, half because sometimes dark humor is all that keeps you sane. The pattern became clearer with every addition. Karen and her circle weren't just enforcing rules. They were building a pressure cooker. Raise stress, confuse with paperwork, threaten with legalese, then swoop in with a solution. The HOA can offer you a quick buyout. We'll handle the paperwork. You can move somewhere quieter, less stressful. And because most folks like Dorothy just wanted peace, they took the deal. They packed up, left their homes of decades, and disappeared. But they didn't just disappear from the neighborhood, they disappeared from the system. No forwarding addresses, no new property records, no digital trail, just gone. And that's when I called in a favor. An old friend of mine from the bureau, Agent Melissa Chong, owed me from a joint task force case in Arizona back in 2015. She listened as I laid it out. The elderly, the buyouts, the missing records, the intimidation. Then I said the one word that made her pause. Goldstone. The Goldstone name didn't come out of nowhere. A decade ago, he ran a shell company ring in Florida, laundering cash through low-value real estate transactions and HOA schemes. I arrested him myself after an 8-month investigation. He was smooth, arrogant, and smarter than most of his kind. Got 12 years. But word had trickled down he'd been released early. If Goldstone's involved, Melissa said slowly, then you're not dealing with a greedy neighbor anymore. You're looking at organized property seizure. And that was it. That's when I knew Silverstone wasn't the endgame. It was just a test site. A week passed and Walter refused to go to sleep without checking on the chickens himself. He would shuffle outside at dusk with a flashlight, humming half-remembered war songs, murmuring to the hens like they were old army buddies. "Still with me, boys?" he'd ask them. One night, I caught him saluting justice. I didn't interrupt. There was something sacred about it. Something unspoken. But sacred things, I've learned, are the first to be targeted by men like Goldstone. They don't like roots. They don't like meaning. They like profit. Then came the break. Rodriguez flagged a transaction buried deep in the county's online filings. An LLC called Red Rock Developments had quietly purchased 3 of the vacant HOA homes within a week. Same company name that Goldstone used in Miami. Different state, same blueprint. We'd been asking the wrong question. Not why the chickens? But why the land? Silverstone sat right along a proposed rezoning corridor. A planned rail extension and mixed-use development had been announced in a hush-hush press release only distributed to city investors. Someone had tipped Goldstone off before it went public. He needed the land, but not the people, especially not ones with history, veterans, teachers, locals. They were unpredictable, sentimental, resistant. He needed a clean slate. Karen Mitchell was just the scalpel. Goldstone was the surgeon. And the operation? Ethically sterilized gentrification, baited with regulation, justified by neighborhood improvement. But at its heart, it was theft. Slow, sanctioned theft. That night, I sat across from Walter at the kitchen table. Emma had gone home, and the house was quiet. I showed him the map, the LLC filings, the recorded footage. He looked down, eyes heavy, voice low. "I knew it wasn't just about the birds," he said. She looked at me like I was already gone, like I didn't matter anymore. I reached across, put my hand on his. "You matter," I told him. "You're going to show them just how much." And that's when we started building the plan, not just for defense, but for exposure, for resistance. Operation Chicken Justice wasn't just about pushing back anymore. It was about lighting a fire, one that would reach beyond our fences. Because if this could happen to Walter, to Dorothy, to men and women who gave everything for this country, it could happen to anyone. And I'll be damned if I let them get away with it. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air just changes? Like something underneath the floorboards has shifted, and nobody else can feel it, but you do. That's how I felt the moment I stepped into the Silverstone HOA board meeting that night. It was supposed to be a routine gathering, scheduled at 7 p.m., tucked inside the community clubhouse with lemon bars on a folding table and rows of stackable chairs lined up like pews at a service nobody wanted to attend. But something was off. The chairs were arranged differently. A few unfamiliar faces hovered in the back, quiet, watchful. One of them wore sunglasses inside. Another kept his hand near his belt in a way that screamed, "Carrying concealed." And Karen Mitchell, bless her overconfident little heart, was standing at the podium like she was announcing the end of democracy and expected applause. I didn't come alone. Rodriguez flanked my right, Davis stood quietly near the exit, and Susan Morrison, now carrying a GoPro strapped across her chest like a badge of civilian authority, was recording the whole thing. Not that we needed the footage, we already had hours of audio, video, and paper trails. But something about watching Susan stand there in her gardening hat and orthopedic shoes with a camera beaming red made me feel like maybe, just maybe, the tide was finally starting to turn. Karen cleared her throat. "This meeting is now in session," she announced, tapping the mic with the manic energy of a person who knows the spotlight's about to burn her alive, but still hopes for one last show. First order of business: urgent action on Lot 117 due to ongoing poultry violations, non-compliance with subdivision aesthetic standards, and obstruction of HOA authority. The crowd was silent. A few heads turned toward Walter, who sat next to me wearing his old Veterans of Foreign Wars jacket, medals still pinned. His hands were folded, but I saw the subtle tremor in his left pinky. His old signal for "I'm ready, but stay close." Before Karen could continue, I stepped forward, my voice calm but clear. "Madam President, I'm going to stop you right there, before you dig a hole you won't climb out of." She froze, not because she feared me, not yet, but because the room didn't erupt the way she expected. No one stood to clap. No one even coughed. They were listening, waiting. I pulled out the folder. The thick one. The one we'd nicknamed the guillotine. Inside was everything: fraudulent vote tallies, fake citations, bank records showing kickbacks, wire transfers routed through shell LLCs that circled back to Red Rock developments. But I didn't show it. Not yet. No, people like Karen need to feel the collapse, not just hear about it. So I started with the easy questions. Karen, can you tell us how many board members were elected via proper vote last quarter? She blinked. Well, that depends. It doesn't. The answer is 0. No public notice. No ballots. No quorum. Murmurs rippled through the audience. And Bradley Kent, your legal counsel. Do you know he's not licensed to practice law in this state? Or any state? Or that he's facing fraud charges in Nevada? A gasp somewhere in the third row. Karen turned red. But the real moment, the one I'll carry with me until the day they lay me in the dirt, was when Walter stood up. No cane. No speech prepared. Just a folded letter in his hand. He opened it slowly, like he was defusing a bomb. This, he said, is the eviction notice I got 3 days after my wife's memorial. Signed by a woman who's never served anything but HOA cupcakes. Laughter from the crowd. Nervous, yes, but real. He looked Karen in the eye. I killed men in Nam who showed more decency than you've managed in a lifetime of neighborhood barbecues. That hit her like a shovel. She tried to speak, but the moment was gone. It wasn't hers anymore. It never was. And then the doors opened. 2 agents from the bureau walked in, quiet as whispers. Melissa Chong led the way, flashing her badge not for drama, but for clarity. Karen Mitchell, she said, you are under investigation for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder intimidation, and unlawful property seizure under federal housing statutes. That should have been the end of it. Karen should have panicked, cried, pleaded, but she smiled. Just a small twitch like a broken doll. You think this ends with me? She whispered. You really think I'm the one pulling the strings? And that's when the lights cut out. Just for a second, long enough for adrenaline to hit. When they came back on, Karen was still there. But one of the men in the back, the one with the sunglasses, was gone. Slipped out during the flicker. We scrambled. Davis ran after him. Melissa shouted for backup, and I pushed Walter behind me instinctively. But by the time we reached the parking lot, the man had vanished. No car. No tracks. Ghost. We ran the footage later. The man had been at 3 prior meetings. Never spoke. Always sat near exits. His face triggered an old database match. Michael Volkov. Ex-Russian intelligence, now freelance. Worked with Goldstone in Florida on land clearances and intimidation jobs. He wasn't HOA. He was above HOA. And he was here. Back at the precinct, I stood in front of the whiteboard, now scrawled with connections. Volkov to Red Rock. Red Rock to Goldstone. Goldstone to Karen. Karen to our town. Our homes. Our people. And one phrase echoed in my head. Karen's last words. You think this ends with me? Didn't. Because 2 days later, Dorothy's house was set on fire. Arson clean and fast. No casualties, but everything gone. Rodriguez found remnants of a timer device under the porch. This wasn't amateur hour. It was message sending. And we got it loud and clear. I held a town hall the next night. No HOA, no cameras, no bureaucracy. Just neighbors, veterans, grandmas, kids. We packed the firehouse. I stood there, not as chief of police, but as Marcus Thompson. Grandson, neighbor, defender of chickens and common decency. I told them everything. The scheme, the corruption, the danger. I watched as the room transformed. Not from scared to brave, but from tired to ready. And that's a bigger shift than most people realize. You can fight scared. But when you fight because you're done being quiet, that's when revolutions are born. So we started organizing. A watchdog group, legal fundraisers, nightly patrols. Susan drafted a petition for full HOA board recall. Dorothy, homeless but undeterred, moved in with a neighbor and offered to teach anyone who wanted to understand their rights. Emma started recording videos from Walter's porch, telling the story 1 minute at a time. Within a week, one of her clips had over 2 million views. She titled it, They tried to take my grandpa's chickens. Simple. True. Viral. I wish I could tell you we won. That Goldstone was caught, that Volkov was dragged in cuffs through our streets. But this isn't that kind of story. Not yet. What I can tell you is this: we changed. We remembered who we were. We remembered that our homes aren't just property. They're history, memory, identity. You don't mess with that and walk away clean. And if they come back, well, let's just say the chickens aren't the only ones watching anymore. You can tell a man's not from around here when he walks across gravel like it's carpet. No dust on his boots, no squint in his eyes, no tension in the spine when the wind shifts. Just that too clean look like he expects the world to behave because it always has. That's what I saw in the man who knocked on Susan Morrison's door the morning after we held the firehouse meeting. Tall, suit-pressed, voice smooth like a second-hand car salesman from up north. Said his name was Mr. Clay. Offered to buy her house on the spot. Cash. No inspection. No strings. She told him to get off her lawn or she'd feed him to the compost bin. That's when he leaned in and said something that made her hands shake when she told me about it later. A woman like you, he said, should be careful what she puts on the internet. Virality has consequences. Then he smiled and tipped his fake cowboy hat like we were all still living in a John Ford film. That night, we pulled the security footage from Susan's porch cam and froze on his face. Clean shave, Eastern European bone structure, no fingerprints, literally. The FBI ran his image and came back with an alias, Reuben Clay, but real name unknown. He was flagged in 2 countries, suspected ties to Goldstone's old shell corporations, but nothing that would stick in court. He'd shown up in Kansas during a string of farmland buyouts, then again in North Carolina when a set of elderly homeowners voluntarily relocated, after their dog mysteriously disappeared and their water got shut off 3 nights in a row. Pattern clear as day. Bully. Pressure. Isolate. Offer escape. Collect property. Move on. But this time they'd picked the wrong town. You mess with 1 chicken in Silverstone, you get the whole flock. And I don't mean just the birds. We'd started organizing night patrols, rotating neighbors in teams of 2 to walk the streets with flashlights, body cams, and radios we'd borrowed from the volunteer fire department. It wasn't about being cops, it was about being seen, being present. Predators thrive in silence and shadows. We took that away. I watched as guys like Martin Caldwell, who hadn't left his porch in a year, started walking again. Clara Matthews, who used to sit quietly at the back of every meeting, started keeping the books for the Resistance Fund. Hell, even old Larry Thompson, the man who once tried to outlaw Halloween decorations, started passing out coffee to the patrol team at midnight. Community was coming back. Not the kind they talk about in HOA newsletters with cursive fonts and stock photos. The real kind. The kind built under pressure, in fire with sweat and dignity. But while the neighborhood banded together, the enemy changed tactics. They stopped coming to the door, started whispering behind it. Suspicious phone calls. Real estate agents suddenly pulling listings. One neighbor, Miss Ella, 84, sharp as ever, got a visit from Child Protective Services. Anonymous complaint, they said, claimed her grandson wasn't being cared for properly. She hasn't had a child in that house since 1989. But the paperwork was enough to spook her for days. That's the trick, you see. You don't need force when you have fear. And still, we held. But then the letter came. It wasn't addressed to me directly, but it found its way into my inbox through a burner email. Encrypted. Just a few lines, typed in courier font like something out of a bad spy novel. You're out of your depth, Thompson. Leave this alone. You're a small-town cop playing hero in someone else's war. I stared at it for 5 minutes. Not because I was scared, but because I knew it meant one thing: Goldstone wasn't just watching. He was close. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch with Walter and Justice, the rooster, not the concept, though at this point they'd become pretty interchangeable. Walter sipped decaf from a thermos. They're not used to being resisted, he said simply. They count on fear, but they don't know what fear means to folks like us. Fear's just another day when you've been shot at in a jungle and made it home. I nodded, watching the stars blink above the coop. They think we'll fold, I said. They think we'll settle, take the buyout, move on. Walter laughed quietly. They think chickens are just animals, not warning bells. 3 days later, Emma didn't come home from school on time. Now before you panic, let me be clear. She's okay. She's safe. But for an hour and 47 minutes, we couldn't find her. No bus driver saw her get off. No teachers saw her leave late. She wasn't at her usual stop, and her phone had been powered down. My blood turned to ice. Rodriguez activated the local alert protocols, and I sent every available unit, every neighbor, every dog walker and store clerk I knew into motion. Susan started live streaming. "Silverstone's own child is missing," she said, eyes hard. "Find her." We found her in the library, hiding in the basement, curled up behind a stack of outdated encyclopedias. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were wide. "A man followed me," she whispered. "He had a black car. I ducked into the alley behind the bakery and ran here. That was it. No plate, no name, no proof. Just fear. Just enough fear to remind us that this was no longer about chickens or bylaws or even land. It was about control, domination. They wanted to take the fight out of us by creeping into the places we thought were safe. Our schools, our families, our faith." I called Melissa at the bureau, told her it was time. No more watching, no more waiting. "I need leverage," I said. "I need something that makes them back off before someone ends up in a box." She hesitated. Then she said one name, Tide Point. I'd never heard it, but she had. It was the code name for a project out west. An illegal coordination between real estate investors, foreign equity firms, and a string of disgraced developers all tied together by one thing: Goldstone. He wasn't just targeting Silverstone. He was blueprinting something larger. Community rebalancing. He called it clearing inefficiencies. That's what they'd labeled Walter's lot. An inefficiency. But we got lucky. One of Melissa's contacts, an IRS analyst with a chip on her shoulder and a knack for spreadsheets, found a file. Unredacted. Misfiled. One of Goldstone's shell companies had funneled $300,000 into a slush fund for community compliance operations. One of the payments went to a company called Palmetto Strategies, registered in our county. The listed operations director? David Wilson. David had been quiet these last few weeks. Too quiet. Always saying the right things at the meetings, always carrying a clipboard, always helpful. But something about him never sat right with me. Now I knew why. We brought him in under a noise ordinance pretext. Nothing big, just enough to get him talking. And boy, did he talk. At first, vague answers, lawyer buzzwords. But then we showed him the payment record. His eyes darted. His palms sweat. And then he leaned forward. "You don't understand," he whispered. "They're not going to stop. Not here. Not anywhere. They're buying cities next. They've already mapped out the next 20 communities. This is just the prototype." We recorded every word. David cut a deal. Immunity for testimony. Wiretaps. Surveillance access. In 72 hours, we'd flipped the script. Goldstone wasn't hiding anymore. He was cornered. And men like him, they don't do well with corners. So here we are now. The line has been drawn. We know who the enemy is. We know what they want. And they know we're not stepping aside. Not for threats, not for money, not for fear. We've got chickens. We've got cameras. We've got each other. And we've got nothing left to lose. It was strange, the way peace returned. Not with a bang or a courtroom speech or even an arrest. No, it came slowly, like morning fog pulling back from a field, revealing what had always been there underneath. It started the day the federal subpoenas went out. Unmarked cars rolled through Silverstone just after dawn. Rodriguez and Davis watched from a black SUV near the HOA clubhouse. For agents stepped out in windbreakers, calm as ever, clipboards in hand, names memorized. Karen Mitchell was already packing when they knocked. Her SUV was loaded pillows, a suitcase, a box labeled HOA Archives. Her face when she opened the door was something I won't forget. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was calculation, like she was running numbers in her head, wondering how much time she had before everything collapsed. One of the agents, young, sharp, handed her a sealed envelope. "You're wanted in DC for deposition," he said. "Fraud, conspiracy, witness intimidation. The usual." She didn't argue. She just nodded once and got in the SUV without a word. But it wasn't over. Not even close. By noon, 12 other homes in Silverstone had been raided. HOA board members, compliance officers, one guy who'd served as property aesthetics consultant and made over $90,000 a year by fining old ladies for mailbox rust. Every one of them thought they'd been invisible, that nobody noticed the schemes, the fines, the forced purchases from shell LLCs that trace back to Red Rock and, further, to Goldstone's digital web. But we noticed. We built a case brick by brick, thread by thread, and now they were watching it all unravel. Goldstone didn't go quietly. He sent his last message through fire. 2 days after Karen left, the old utility shed behind the HOA office went up in flames. Files, digital backups, hard drives, torched. Arson teams said it was professional. Accelerants, chemical starters, clean burn. No prints, no suspects, just smoke. But they missed one thing. Walter's old war buddy, Eugene, had been tinkering with his drone the day before. The man was 83 and couldn't figure out his email, but he loved flying that damn thing around the neighborhood. Turns out, he caught footage of a black sedan pulling up at 3 a.m., a hooded man breaking in, and 34 minutes later, the first flicker of flame. We had a plate, and we had confirmation, Volkov. Last known sighting. After that, gone. Vanished. But his absence didn't weaken us. It focused us. We pushed harder. Melissa from the bureau called one night and said, "Whatever you did, it worked. The DOJ is opening a national investigation. HOA racketeering. You're ground zero." I sat on my porch that night, watching Justice strut across the yard like he owned the place, and thought about how it all started. One angry woman, 5 chickens, and a town too tired to keep quiet. But now it was something bigger. People from other states started calling. From Arkansas, Oregon, even Florida. "Hey Chief, we got something like this going on. Can you send us your paperwork?" Susan Morrison became a kind of folk hero. Emma's channel crossed 5 million views. She got invited to speak at a youth justice summit in Austin. Wore her pink boots and told a crowd of 400 that sometimes you have to make noise to protect the quiet things. Walter never said much during all this. But the day the indictment list was released publicly, he walked with me down to the coupe, sat beside me, and handed me a folded letter. "From Karen," he said. I opened it. Sloppy cursive, ink smudged in places. It wasn't an apology. Not really. Just a string of regrets. She wrote about pressure, about promises made by people she couldn't name, about debt, about fear. And one line stuck with me. "I forgot that people remember, and when they remember together, they become dangerous." She was right. In the weeks that followed, Silverstone transformed. Not in some Hallmark movie kind of way. There was still tension, lawsuits pending, an occasional troll on the internet accusing us of anti-development hysteria. But there was also laughter again. People stood longer on sidewalks, waved slower from their porches, fixed things without being told. We disbanded the HOA formally, voted it out, every single member. We replaced it with a rotating volunteer council, 3 seniors, 2 parents, and 1 rotating student from the local high school. No fines, just service hours and conversations. And it worked. But there was one more surprise. A month later, we got a letter from the Department of Corrections. Karen was in a minimum security facility in Arizona, assigned to the Community Agriculture Program. Guess what they put her in charge of? Chickens. I swear to God. She now oversees 46 hens and 1 very testy rooster. Full circle, Walter said, chuckling. The universe has a weird sense of humor. And then, in a moment I'll never forget, he pulled out a second letter. It was from Karen to Emma. A real one this time. Apologetic. Honest. She said the little girl reminded her of who she used to be, before control got mistaken for safety. Emma read it twice, nodded and said, "I hope her chickens like jazz. That's what ours get every morning." So we didn't just win. We endured. We built something stronger than revenge. We built memory. We built legacy. And in that space, among old boots and new fences, between a girl and her birds and an old man and his story, we found something rare. We found our home again. And if they ever try to come back, well, they'll find the porch lights are still on, the coffee's still hot, and the chickens still crow every morning at 5:32 sharp. Some things don't change. Some things never should.